Hello and welcome to this edition of Finance and Technology Insights. I'm Brian Williams, Northshire Consulting.
I'm Eric Bierendorf, CEO of Evernet Consulting. How's it going, Brian?
It's going very well. A nice drive up to your residence this morning, and we get an opportunity here to record one in person.
Yeah.
Which should be kind of fun, sitting across the table.
Yeah, this is fun. It's nice to experiment and try new things, and since we've got nobody pissed off, we can do what we want.
Yeah, why not? We've got it's going to be kind of weird, like looking at you.
Yeah, do I look
looking
at you?
Looking at the camera? Yeah, you're a little bit over we're probably over each other's monitor a little bit. So I'll try to look at the camera, but it's going to be hard to do sitting across from you. You're looking dashing this morning, so it's going to be hard to look away.
Yeah. Look, I'll show off a little bit on my backyard. Look at those stripes, ladies and gentlemen. Look at those.
Yeah,
stripes.
That's right.
Want to talk about those stripes?
We talked about last week with your auto mower and stuff. So you should actually have it running in the back.
I can actually. Maybe if I can do this while you fill the air, I'll have it run. But yeah, those are stripes produced by a robot.
That's pretty good. So you have it programmed in to do the vertical lines like that, or did it?
Yeah, the new model that came out this year is GPS, so it has a little more smarts and mapping to it. Okay. Prior to this model, it was like the original Roombas, where the original Roomba would just like start doing a circular pattern. If it bumped into something, it would do a quarter turn and then start the circular pattern again, and it would finish the job just by brute force. This model is new, so it doesn't. The big difference is it doesn't require a boundary wire to be dug into the ground.
Right.
I wasn't going to do that. So I've been watching the space for a few years now, and I saw Husqvarna, which is one of the leaders in the robot mower space, and they just came out with this GPS-driven one. A little disappointed the software is not as good as the vacuum software.
Yeah.
The mapping software the mapping software for the vacuum is really nice. Like, once it does a pass around the house, it maps using LiDAR, and it can kind of get the gist of rooms. And then from there, even after the thing's parked, you can rubber banding in mapping software is where you can push pins and boundaries and borders and stuff. It's really great. We had a Robo Rock vacuum, and that's really nice. The mower, you have to create a workspace map and then drive it with your phone around the border.
Yeah.
And it's clumsy. And fortunately, I haven't had to redo that, but you can't then edit the walls and say, bring this in, bring that. You can to some degree, but it's not great. It's not great.
Well, you got a pretty good space here in that there's not a lot of regular obstacles. You've basically got a rectangle that you're working with.
I've worked hard at making it that way.
I know you did. I know. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So I guess given the two, you'd rather have the hardware good and then the software not so great, because that can always be changed, right?
Yeah, I think what I'm suffering from is a little early adopter. I'm not, being a technologist, people think that I have a Tesla and I have this and I have that and I have this and this. I'm not an early adopter. I'm not a leading edge early adopter. I'm before the hump. What do they call that? I think they call it the adoption curve even.
Early humper? Pre-humper.
Thank God we don't have an audience.
That might be the short for the week.
Yeah, no. So I'm usually ahead of the curve to some degree, but I'm just not on that forward edge. With the mower, I feel like I am an early adopter. I feel like it's because it only has the ultrasonic sensors, which is radar. The vacuum has camera, ultrasonic, which is radar, and LiDAR, which LiDAR literally can paint a whole three-dimensional map in real time of the space, and this is the same technology that they're putting in these robot cars.
Right.
I was going to say that. Same exact hardware, ultrasonic sensors, which is the radar, the LiDAR, and then the vision technology. Now, we've talked about this quite a bit. Elon Musk believes that the future is just in vision. So he pulled out the ultrasonic sensors from the cars. And even last week, I was seeing reports that the older cars with the ultrasonic sensors in the Teslas, if they go in for repair, the repair order tries to slide in, disconnect the ultrasonics.
Oh.
Yeah, so they're going all in on vision.
Okay.
Waymo, which is Google, and Cruise, which is GM, are running self-driving robo taxis, and they're not there yet. They believe that LiDAR, which is laser radar, is still going to be important. And I think they even probably have ultrasonic. So anyways, coming back to the mower, this just has the ultrasonic sensor. So it's like a bat vision, basically, you know. And then on top of that, the mapping software. I don't know, like you can't just be like, move this wall in, cut this, you know. You can't, you know. So it's a little disappointing, but that's early adopter,
right? And probably the next version, you'll be able to create an image in Midjourney, upload it, and then you'll be able to paint it into your lawn.
Yeah,
that would be.
Well, you know, the vacuum with the camera, it uses AI to, when it sees an obstruction in its way, it will take a picture of it and then use AI to try to identify the object. Yeah. And it sends me a picture saying, shoes detected, 98% confident.
Right.
And another thing with the robot vacuums is all the reviewers and all the 1-star reviews are like, people come home to like dog shit smeared all over their floor. Yeah. So the early vacuums like couldn't identify, and then like cords and shoelaces are a nightmare for them, you know. So they're trying to identify that with vision tech. That's what the vision gives you.
Right.
So the mower just doesn't have that. So it will see something in its way, but it won't know what's in its way.
Yeah.
So I suspect in another couple of years they'll bring that hardware to the mower. But,
yeah. I was thinking about, you're talking about the cars and how they're taking off the sensors that allow the cars basically to hear. So if you are vision impaired or need corrective lenses, it says it on your license. If you are hearing impaired, is there an indication on your license or not?
Hearing impaired, like a hearing impairment on your driver's license?
Yeah, would that matter?
No, I don't think so. And let me just
go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to make a correction. There actually aren't any. Well, not that I know of. They're not actually sensing audio yet. I think they're starting to, because Tesla famously had some crashes with some emergency vehicles. And so I think Mercedes just announced, I think last week, that they got approved to do level 3 driving. Are you familiar with the levels of autonomy?
No, walk me through those.
Well, there's level 0 through 5 autonomy in terms of autonomous driving. Level 0 is no cruise control, no automation. Level 1 is, I think, adaptive cruise control and maybe lane keeping. And it's all in context of how much control and responsibility the driver has. Level 2 is where I think is adaptive cruise control and automatic braking and lane keeping, but the driver has to monitor and manage, right?
Yeah.
Level 3 is where the vehicle, you can get in the highway, set it, turn it on, and you can take your eyes away from the car, and the car manufacturer has liability, takes the liability. And Mercedes, even in their press release last week, says Mercedes is liable for what the car does in this mode of drive. And then level 4 is kind of that in all. So there's level 3 is some cases, so some roads are mapped for level 3. And then level 4 is like most roads or all roads. And then level 5 is like everywhere, all the time, no steering wheel required, no human intervention. Yeah. So that's the SAE, I forget what SAE is, the standards, an automotive standard.
Okay.
So I jumped the track. So Mercedes announced that they just got a permit in California last week for level 3 autonomy on some roads. But I was going to make a correction that with the exception of Mercedes, I don't think any other cars are adopting sound sensor, audio sensor.
Okay.
So the cars aren't listening yet.
Got it.
For that point. But anyways, the mower's going to eventually, I suspect, get vision and LiDAR or some combination of that. Because these robots, like, once they can see, once they can hear, once they can detect, the AI is that body of knowledge that is allowing the robots to all of these, Google image search, all of the image recognition that the computer is doing. Once they can see once they can perceive and see and know what they're seeing, it's just a software and form factor, right? That's why Elon, are you familiar with his Optimus robot, his bipedal humanoid robot?
Yeah.
He realized that he's not a car company. He's just a car company today, but they're building all of the software and AI that once they complete that task, they can take that software and adapt it to also any form factor.
Right.
You know, they can put it on a robot, they can put it on a lawnmower, they can put it on anything, because that body of knowledge is done.
Right.
You know, the science is done.
Mhm.
You know, which I find pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and he's got all that data that's stored, and he's doing his own AI stuff.
Yeah.
And for the investors in Tesla, so Kathy Wood was on with. So Kathy Wood runs a company called ARK Invest.
Yep.
I've talked about her before.
Yep.
And she's interesting. She's had some performance anxiety, performance issues before, where she's she goes through periods of big underperformance and big outperformance. So it's very volatile. And
Well, she made huge headlines when Tesla popped
Mhm.
2-3 years ago,
yep.
right before the
And-
split and after the split.
And most recently, so she's been a long time holder of NVIDIA and sold it out of one of her main funds right before this big thing. So she took some heat for that, but she still has it in other funds,
Right.
whatever. But if you look at her projections on Tesla, it's not about selling the vehicles. It's all about them being the next Uber. It's all about the subscription services. It's all about
A technology company.
Yeah.
I just watched Ford. I just watched a Ford, an interview with Ford CEO Jim Farley yesterday, and it was fascinating to hear him. And there's a lot of meat on this bone here, and I don't want to interrupt you, but he just proclaimed, like, you know, he compared himself to Tesla, and fascinatingly, he recognized that the legacy car manufacturers and all new car manufacturers have to be software companies, because they're treating cars now as like consumer electronic devices now, like your cell phone. And the legacy car manufacturers and gearheads, if you will, no offense to the gearheads out there, that's not really the direction that cars are going. But what he did say is, he compared himself to Tesla and said, we need to be like Tesla. We need to be a software company like Tesla. But then he says, Tesla has their power company, their Powerwall. They're doing all this AI stuff. And he stopped and said, we have no ambition to do that.
Right.
So he wants to just be a car manufacturer, but he recognizes what kind of focus that they need to have in order to be successful in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and they've got the dealer infrastructure. They've got the name that people, for whatever reason, might not like Elon Musk for his Twitter stuff and all that. So even if they just catch the business of people that don't like Tesla or don't like, that's a huge car market.
Yeah.
So they want to be in the subscription business like everybody else.
Yeah.
So there's cars are parked 95% of the time.
Yeah.
Right. So
huge waste of capital. Yeah. Huge waste.
And there's 5 parking spots for every car that exists.
Yeah,
right?
it's
so
disgusting.
The real estate that'll be unlocked.
Oh my God, yeah.
It'll be interesting because the real estate that'll be unlocked by not having to have these parking spaces, because cars will pick you up and drop you off.
Right.
And also the rush for the prime real estate to get the cars are going to have to be stationed somewhere. They're probably not going to drive 24 hours a day. They'll maybe drive 20 hours a day.
Right.
Maybe there's some sort of maintenance and charging and stuff that's involved.
Clean up, turnover.
Yeah.
It's going to be like room service. There's going to be whole new industries that are going to spring up around supporting these cars, these auto cars.
Yeah, they're going to basically go into like a car wash type tunnel, and all these robot arms are going to come out.
Vacuuming, claiming lost property and all sorts of
things.
And
I mean, just think of the profitability from all the loose change in people's cars. Just by sucking that out of between.
Well, the thing that fascinates me is and this is the finance and technology and transportation insights. But what fascinates me is I drive a 15-year-old vehicle.
Yeah.
It serves me well. It's incredibly reliable. I don't have any need for it. It's been long paid off, whatever. But when you go to these robotaxi environment, like you'll get in a new vehicle. Basically, you'll be in a new vehicle all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You'll maybe 2 years old, max 3 years old. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
right.
The turnover, so it'll feel fresh and new, and you'll get that new car smell probably every time, frequently or whatever. So
yeah.
And then you mentioned the real estate, imagine you're just going to get door-to-door service everywhere you go.
Yeah. Yeah, as if you were Uber now.
Right.
There just won't be a driver.
Right.
Right. And if you do it on vacation or if you're in the city, it'll just be kind of a permanent thing. But yeah, we're looking forward to that.
I can't wait. Honestly, I can't wait. In fact, I really hope that and part of the reason why I have this vehicle so long is I really am a believer that this is just a software I don't even want to say problem. It's a software project
Mhm.
that they want. It's not if, it's just a matter of when,
Right.
right. And once they're done building that product, that software product or software stack, as the developers would call it, is done.
Mhm.
And Elon is anticipating that, and he has 2 million Tesla robots ready to receive that software.
Right. The hardware on cars is done. There's
It's
nothing, a 5-year-old car isn't that much different than, there's some issues with tires that, they
Yeah.
want to get to, airless tires, right? That's something they want to do. But as far as like how much more comfortable can seats get, how much more
Yeah.
aerodynamic can they get, how much better can the windows get,
Before we get off transportation, I'll just say
Yeah.
one more thing. There was a serious major announcement over the last 2 weeks, again with Ford. So in November of last year, 2022, Elon announced that the Tesla plug to charge their Tesla, he's opening that as a standard, and he's welcoming other car manufacturers to use that standard. And Ford announced 2 weeks ago, I think, that they are going into, in fact, adopt his plug.
Yep.
And for that, they'll be able to use the 12,000 Tesla superchargers, which they call, the supercharger network, which is Tesla's homegrown charging network to support their cars, is massive throughout the world. And not only that, it's they say it's incredibly reliable, and the experience is like seamless. So you pull up to a Tesla supercharger in your Tesla. There's no screens on the thing. You just the car is already registered with the Tesla network. The charger can identify the car. You even walk over with the charging cable, and as you walk over to your car's charging flap door, the charger can open the flap door for you.
Right.
And then you plug it in, and then seconds later you're charging, and it's like an incredibly reliable experience. Conversely, the open networks, the competing standard in America is called CCS. I think CCS2, this big boxy plug that with a fat cable, and then there's like a bunch of networks that network operators that try to run these chargers that are not Tesla. And I watch the YouTube reviewers, and they say they're notoriously broken and non-functional. Right. And then the cables are heavy and bulky, or the charging thing is broken. They said it's like a really horrible experience.
Right.
And so they viewed the Tesla supercharger charging network as kind of a moat for Tesla. It's one of the reasons it's a value add to buying. Not only are they the best cars, but they've got the best charging network. Right. So there's a lot of chatter when Ford announced, a big Detroit automaker announcing that they're going to adopt the Tesla plug and charger. That has made huge news. And then Thursday last week, Mary Barra and Elon Musk did a Twitter live session, and she announced that GM is going to adopt it.
Right.
So did you hear about that? Does that mean anything?
No, I think that all makes sense. You couldn't, if you went back 100 years, you couldn't have cars running on different gasoline, right? I mean, you kind of remember the change from leaded to unleaded, like that was kind of a big deal, but you couldn't, that model isn't sustainable. So you knew at some point something had to give.
Some consolidation.
Same thing with electricity and whatever. You couldn't have companies with different plugs, that kind of stuff. So you knew something. They either had to figure it out themselves, or the government was going to step in. Just like with Apple and the EU and their plugs and USB-C and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you knew there's eventually something that had to go give there.
Yeah, it was big news.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been all tech. What's going on the finance side of the house?
Well, I was listening to this webinar on the way in that was getting me all fired up. A recorded webinar, so it was on by ZT Savings, which I don't want to spend a ton of time on that we talked about, but it's this example of the state putting something out there and doing this program, and it was through CBA, which is the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and not giving a full picture of what's going on. Which is frustrating, because you want people to have the right information and businesses be able to make an educated decision that's in their best interest. And
imagine that.
But that's not happening. I kind of thought it would as the program sort of evolved and matured, but it's just not getting to that level. And now there's other states that are beginning to start these programs, and it ends up being kind of this echo chamber between the states and the think tankers, and it's funny because when somebody will put out some misinformation or portray something inaccurately, the other one will pick it up, and then it'll go around to the other states, and then it kind of gets in this vicious circle, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, that got me all fired up. It was interesting. There's a story about Reddit and the APIs, so this is kind of an interesting one. So
you're talking my language again.
Yeah. I mean, it's finance, it's technology. So all these companies that have had their APIs and made it available for relatively small costs, now the AI systems are pegging these and just doing mass pulls of all this data. And so now Reddit's really, I mean, they've got such a treasure trove of information there. And
I've never been a Redditor, have you?
I haven't. No,
it's a huge network.
I know.
But I haven't spent. I tried to spend some time on it, but I just couldn't get it.
It's almost like Twitter for me. I've never been a big Twitter guy either. I don't know why. I've tried and I check it once in a while.
But it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I know advisors like built their whole practice on Reddit, like doing forums and stuff. But I never got into it. But yeah, that's another instance where Reddit's kind of upping those charges for people that are using the API. But you had sort of legacy API users who are using it for just regular use the way it was originally intended.
That's right.
And now you've got the big AI sources pegging that API,
right,
pulling massive amounts of information for relatively small costs. So I think these companies that have, and Twitter did something similar too, where they kind of throttled their API, but you're having these companies now that have all this huge data trying to figure out what they're going to do with it, whether it's, kind of selling that information to the AI platforms or building their own or kind of an in-between thing.
Right.
So, there were ways for them to prevent Google from kind of scrubbing their information before. You could, block it from certain pages from being crawled and that sort of stuff. So I think everybody's trying to figure out what that right pricing mechanism is, and what it's probably something that's tiered. You don't want to, your legacy users using that API, you don't want to leave them out of the dark.
Right.
And, attach big fees to them, but then you don't want to, you want to be able to charge people appropriately on the higher end. So that was kind of a big story that came out. So,
go ahead.
Yeah. So the CNBC has, a bunch of Reddit communities who are in the dark, to protest proposed changes on how they build third-party developers. That's starting today. And they're also looking at an IPO, Reddit too. So obviously you've got, financial issues at play here, and they're trying to clean up their balance sheet, and they're trying to position themselves.
So Reddit's trying to position for an IPO?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that is some finance news. So they're trying. Okay, so they're dealing with trying to monetize appropriately their API,
right?
And at the same time, how is that impacting their imminent IPO?
Yep. And how it's going to impact their small developers, and how it's going to impact, because people are using these like Twitter and like Facebook, they're using these platforms for free and exchanging their data, exchanging their knowledge for use of their platform.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we, as a software, or I guess a software consulting company, we're a technology consulting company. Internally, even we use a whole stack of software, right, to run our business, and our clients use a stack of software. And since software has gone to the web or the cloud, it's made the data in the respective software is highly available. So you can have two applications that live in the cloud, kind of shoulder to shoulder, and you're the user accessing it from your web browser, right? And so now integrations across software platforms and vendors has just been unlocked.
Right.
It's just been an amazing gift. Whereas traditionally on-prem software, where we would have a Windows server in the back room, in the data center, data closet, whatever, and you have Windows PCs on everybody's desk, and you have a SQL database on that server, and then you might have a second software on another server or share the same server, and you're now doing like lateral integrations from one vendor to another. And then maybe you'd have a software vendor in the cloud. So now the cloud vendor's like, well, I've got to access your database on your server, and how do we plug that in? And they made it work, and it was very kludgy. But now that like basically all software has been moved to the cloud, it's highly available, right, around the clock, 24/7, and it's on robust data centers and high availability systems. So now I remember reading an article in like 2011 about APIs are the future. And like as a technologist, I was like, no one an API is, but like, in what context are you talking about? You know,
Right.
And I just even back then I didn't see what is happening today. What is happening today? APIs really are the future.
Sure.
You know, because an API for the non-initiated out there is when you use like Hotmail or Gmail, for example. When you go to gmail.com, you're using the front end user interface, right? And that's how your users are typically experiencing Gmail and using Gmail. But Gmail is a data set, and you can go to a third-party software and use the API, which is the application programming interface, which is the backdoor way to access that data set programmatically. You know that. And so the API, so we see this a lot. Now, what's interesting with Reddit and open networks and open data sets like Reddit, I can see how if they have an open API that they used to charge little to nothing for because the tapping of that was nominal or minor or reasonable, it was kind of inconsequential, and maybe there was no real value to it. Maybe Reddit was leaving the API open and free or inexpensive to further bolster the value of their overall network, right? But then once you have something like AI being like, oh, we can just hoover their data set, I mean, that's going to substantially increase their processing workload, which in the cloud technology, processing and compute cycles actually translates to dollars in cents. It costs money to all. And we've talked about how ChatGPT literally costs like 1/10 of a cent or something with every prompt you give it, and somebody's got to pay for that. Now, conversely, with all of the SaaS software as a service, or cloud-based software that we use, we log into a subset or provisioned corner of our softwares, and we have our own data set that lives within the vendor software. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
And so our software vendors and the model out there is some software vendors charge, if you want to tap into your data set through their API, some software vendors charge you for that. Sometimes it's usually an amount of one more user license. Some vendors don't charge for that.
Right.
And I really enjoy the vendors out there that don't charge for API access because sometimes the value of that can be kind of hard to measure.
Right. And sometimes it's companies do that just because their competitor has opened the API. So for in our world, you might have a custodian like a Schwab or TD Ameritrade, and then you've got your CRM software. And so if obviously TD and Ameritrade are merging together, but if TD Ameritrade said, hey, we're going to open up our API so that you can, when you're in your CRM, also see what holdings, what stock positions that person has, then Schwab says, well, we got to do it for free too.
For free, right?
Yeah.
So I use Mint
on
my mobile, right? I was going to say Mint Mobile, but that's a cell phone company.
Yeah, right.
But Mint is a personal finance aggregator. And I presume that when I connect my accounts to kind of look at all my accounts in one pane of glass, one place, I presume I'm using their API for my subset of data.
Right.
So if they were to charge me for that, like screw you, the value is like not there. I don't think per account. If every single my mortgage and my insurance and all these accounts charge me for API access, that would be the value would be there. And the question is, are they charging into it? Who owns Mint?
Right.
Is there some sort of clearinghouse for API fees, or are these institutions just having an open API, free and open API, to further provide value for their service?
And the reason that banks and financial institutions historically haven't charged for their API is because they're not necessarily a company that wants to drive traffic to their website. Like if you're Reddit, you want people to go to Reddit because you got a stream of ads on the side.
Good point.
And you want people to go there. So if people can pull out that Reddit forum or that Reddit, what they call forums, Reddit post or whatever, without seeing those ads, then it's a problem. But Bank of America, you can log into Bank of America and see what's left on your mortgage, or you could pull it into Mint Bank of America doesn't
Right.
really care.
Right. Or call the branch.
Yeah,
Right.
call the branch. Yeah, that's
So Reddit, you're saying by accessing Reddit through the API exclusively, you're going around their primary revenue model, which is the eyeballs on their homepage. That's
Right.
their product,
Right.
which makes sense.
Yeah.
So then and then there's the two first. So there's the value of the data, which is what you were saying on the website, and then what I said earlier, which is the cost of the computing cycles. So yeah, I guess that's going to be
the eyeballs are the big deal, because Bank of America's not running a stream of ads on their side. They may want you to go to their website so they can try to sell you other products or services. But
I saw those headlines about the API Reddit. What's the current state of that? Do you know?
So it says, so it says third-party Reddit app Apollo. It's going to be one of the hardest hits because of Reddit's billing charge. There's been 6,600 subreddits. I guess that's more what they're called rather than forums.
Right.
Taking communities private or restricted access. Geez, I don't know why I can't say access. So basically doing a blackout to protest this move. It doesn't give a cost of it.
So Apollo, what's Apollo?
Apollo is,
I know there used to be Apollo. I don't know if it's the Apollo.io, but
so it's an application that lets you read the Reddit.
okay.
Reddit's a little bit easier.
It's a client, a Reddit client.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And that's, of course, they were tapping the API for that access to the data set. So now, and then I wonder how Apollo was monetizing, probably through their own ads and subscription, whatever.
Right.
So, well, of course, Reddit would want to charge Apollo for that because Apollo is revenuing and benefiting from Reddit's data set and product. But they're what do they call that? An end run? They're end running it. Is that term end run?
Yeah.
Right. They're kind of like
going
going
around.
They're going around Reddit.
Yeah.
And using its product.
Yeah, and Reddit should charge for that. For that. The reason they don't, I guess, is they figured that Apollo is drawing eyeballs maybe that wouldn't normally be drawn to Reddit.
Yeah. Well, this is a famous story that I always bring up, probably, although I don't think I brought it up on this. Microsoft, in the days of like Windows 1, Windows 2, and Windows 3, even like 3.1 and 95, they knew that their software was being stolen en masse.
Right.
They knew that companies even were like just copying the floppy disk that had Windows 95 on it. But they also knew that the more penetration that they could get the product on, the end goal, like the end goal of a domination or whatever, platform domination was there.
Right. It's like when they supply free stuff to schools.
First one's free.
Like, yeah. It's like, oh, we're going to give all the school systems access to, the whole Google platform, the whole Google suite. It's like, yeah, because you want the kids to be trained on it.
Right. So there is a validity to that business model, giving access and giving it away for free. But eventually, when the investors come calling, you got to monetize.
Yeah. This there's an Apollo developer here, Christian Seelig, who says that apps would need to charge about $5 a month for each user to pay the new fees to.
Good Lord,
Reddit.
that seems a lot.
Yeah,
$5 a month.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
So that, and they're calling out that is what the cost of the Reddit's current or present API charges.
If Apollo were to continue their same usage.
Right.
That's what they would have to charge there.
So that seems like so on the surface of that seems like Reddit's trying to shut Apollo down, not monetize from their access.
Yeah. I mean, if you're Reddit though, why not either buy Apollo or develop your own front end?
Or keep Apollo in business and just come up with a you're getting $0 for the former API usage.
Right.
Anything plus zero is beneficial.
Yeah, there's a market in there somewhere.
Yeah.
If it's no at 5 and it doesn't work for Apollo at 5 and doesn't work for Reddit at 0, I mean, there's a market there somewhere.
Right. So. I don't know what the inside baseball is on that though. If they would want to shut down Apollo, they're getting too big for their britches. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. So Reddit will charge $12,000 for 50 million API requests.
The sheer volume of that is insane.
That's considered a high price relative to its peers.
Okay.
to see what Twitter costs.
So this is really chunky technology stuff. So our stay-at-home moms out there definitely stopped watching at this point.
Well, I don't know. I think it's important stuff. I mean, we're at the sort of apex of this kind of new. I mean, this is all driven by AI. It's all driven by all this sort of machine learning stuff that's out there. So
Right.
I think this stuff is important. It's like the early days of the internet, and the fact that we're in that now, and we get to have these. So here's for some perspective talking about that. So Twitter said it's going to charge $42,000 for 50 million API requests.
So it's more than Reddit.
More than the 12,000, but Apollo said it paid about $166 for the same number.
$166?
$166 for the same number of API requests from their from an online image sharing service.
That's a pretty big delta there.
That is, yep. So we'll see what happens there. That'll be a good follow-up story in a little while. Just figure out what the API pricing is. It seems like a kind of a tiered approach would make sense, but and I'm sure that's what they're working on. People far smarter than us. But
Yeah, it's early days too.
yeah. But I think that's a pretty significant story to follow all that stuff.
So what else?
Well, I see. We should mention that Nathan's here.
Nathan is here. Should we give him a cameo?
Yeah, why not?
Let me see if I can fit him in here. Hang on.
So Nathan helped get us set up today, and he's. I see a lot of his content. So why don't you tell us what you're working on with your individual content through Evernet?
We're putting you on blast.
Oh yeah.
You're fine. You're fine.
Right. So we're doing a lot with a new podcast that
The robot is running in the
Oh, there we go.
background. I don't know if we can pick that up. Sorry, Nathan.
we're good. So Eric and I launched the podcast about a couple months ago.
Yep.
And we've been slowly rolling that out. It's coming out every 2 weeks, and we've got the team breaking that down in different parts. And
Tell the audience who you are in relation to us.
yes, so my name is Nathan Cheatham. I'm the director of marketing for Evernet Consulting, and prior to a few months ago, I was actually the producer for this show.
Ready to do some production.
Do some production to help you guys out. Get things jump started and everything. And then my role expanded, and we ended up with 5 members on the marketing team that I had to direct. So that took a lot of my time, and so I kind of took a step back on this show.
Yep.
But happy to be here. Happy to help you guys set up, and it's pretty cool how, from a technology standpoint, like there's not a whole lot going on here.
No, this is incredibly simple. We just did.
Yeah. Just
Exciting
laptops and internal microphones and cameras.
Yeah, I'm impressed that this is working out.
So
Good. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for letting us put you on blast. You're our first guest, I would say, on FinTech. So I don't know. What do you say? Anything else you want to? Now, just so everybody knows, as soon as we hit stop recording, some of the best stuff comes out of Brian. So
That does happen
can
sometimes.
I pretend to stop the recording?
No, probably better not do that. We'll get all sorts of.
Can you just give it to us?
Probably be. No, I mean, one of the things that we started watching, I turned you on to, was the All In podcast.
Yeah.
So we,
That's
I don't know,
right.
some of the stuff we end up getting into was just talking about that show. We could probably get some pretty good ratings if we just did a review of that show. But I don't know if you saw them this week. They did so they did kind of an abbreviated show, and then they transitioned into a show
A
about
live thing, right?
Yeah, they did a live kind of thing that was at Jason Calcanis, JCal, they call him. He had an event, so they all showed up and just did kind of a live Q&A thing, which was kind of interesting. I was ready to sign off, and then I got sucked in for another 40 minutes of that. But they seem to cover a lot of the topics that we end up doing. Maybe they copy us.
You know what I like about them is they've got all the money that they need, so they can kind of say whatever they want to say.
Right.
Right. And
which is what we do when we hit end recording.
I know. But I share a lot of their views. I mean, they're kind of center aisle, but they say like fiscal conservatism is a good thing, and like some social programs are great. You know what I mean?
what's the best thing about them, and it's hard to tell how much it's really edited, but they do have some conflicts. I mean, they had a couple weeks ago. I was like, sign me off. I'm out of here. I'm gonna do whatever. But then the next week they're in Vegas together. So I like that. I think that's a good, kind of learning experience that they can really butt heads on one particular issue and beat each other up on this thing, and then they're hanging out the next day. So that's always my big takeaway. And the idea that one episode you watch and really agree with one person on one point, and you'll be like, oh, that's kind of my guy, and you'll hit your wagon. You're like, oh, I can't stand this guy, and then you're like, the next episode you're like, yeah, really kind of more aligned with him on this. So I think it's the fact that they kind of have that 4-person panel, and it forces at least me as a viewer to kind of you question everything and listen to everything and kind of take in their viewpoints. And a lot of times they don't come to a conclusion; they just end and go on to the next thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But they did talk about the crackdown on the crypto exchanges, which I think is certainly a finance and technology thing there. So basically, the SEC is saying that these platforms should have registered certain offerings that they had as securities. And I think the SEC is right on that, but where they get beat up a little bit is the SEC approved IPOs for these companies. So when a company goes IPO, that means the SEC has gone through everything.
They didn't do their due diligence.
And basically said these companies are fit for public investment.
Right.
But then basically what they do, the SEC is coming back and saying what you're doing was unregistered securities, which is illegal. So
what is the counter argument for them not thinking? What is Coinbase, and what do they think they are if they're not trading in securities?
So originally they were considered more of like commodities, like a gold or silver, which is different than, like, let's say a stock. So it sort of fell under the Federal Commission for Commodities,
which was now lower bar, lower standard.
Yeah, and so now it's certain things like when you get into staking, which is kind of a weird thing, where basically you're borrowing against your securities, or you have these Bitcoin, but you're then allowing somebody else to use that Bitcoin or buy that Bitcoin, and you receive an interest rate back on that.
Right.
Which at the time, I mean, anybody that falls under the category of like too good to be true. People would hear people be like, yeah, I'm staking my Bitcoin and I earn 7% a month or something. And you're like, that's not sustainable. That's pretty obvious. But people were doing it and people bought into it. And, there's a whole kind of mindset. Of course, you would get into buyer beware. These people, they lost their own money and all this kind of stuff. But there does need to be some sort of protections in place. And there does need to be some sort of people are buying into this stuff. And they're trusting the fact that, well, okay, Coinbase, publicly traded company, the SEC is based on the business model. So they signed off on their business model to be okay for me to invest in what they do.
There's implicit, I don't want to say trust, but I guess trust. There's implicit trust to the market.
Right.
So Coinbase. So I've been sitting high and it's on my crypto investments and for the last year since FTX has been blown up, and because I hold my crypto in Coinbase. So should I be worried? Should I divest?
Well, the question is, what do you do to move that, right? So people can have their own wallets and kind of hold it themselves, versus having it on a platform like Coinbase.
Right. What do they call them, by the way?
Those would be just like the keys. Like
no, but what do they call Coinbase in that context? Custodians.
Yeah, custodians.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So technically, they own it, right? It's like they can somehow sound with it, right?
That's what a lot of the Bitcoiners and stuff say. They're right. They say no keys, no coin, or something. Isn't that their phrase? Like unless you have it, like in your, on your little jump.
It's like something we see in the marketing and in the IT. Like I see like new clients come to us after they've lost trust in their IT company or the marketing company. And they're like, can you help us with all? Yeah, sure, we can help you with all your stuff. Great. So we're doing inventory of their IT and everything. And then we find that their former IT vendor is the registrant owner of their domain name.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh man. I mean, fortunately, there is a legal framework for them to relinquish that. But boy, it's been it's been uncomfortable a number of times
Yeah.
to get the domain. I mean, that's why Evernet, my company, has never registered a domain name. It's just, it's so, it's like the first thing that doesn't pass the smell test. Like if your IT company registers your domain name in their name, and you can go to whois.godaddy.com and do a lookup on your domain name, and if it is not your name or an agent of your company. So anyways, so in the same fashion, the plane going overhead. It's probably not getting picked up. But, the Coinbases and the FTXs. What do they call them?
Coinbases and the FTX.
Exchanges. So the exchanges are custodians.
So the exchanges
of your
are
wallet
custodians
in
of
that
your
context,
wallet,
right?
Context.
But in that
in
same fashion.
And some of these exchanges were creating their own securities. I mean, that's what got FTX in trouble. They were creating their own securities and then creating their own value, and then.
But then they were also like assigning the capital in places inappropriate, right? And they were like mixing client funds with
Commingling
business expenses and things. Or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that was a whole accounting nightmare.
Yeah.
That's kind of that is different than what Coinbase and stuff are doing. But
So I said I keep my crypto in Coinbase, and just in case everybody forgot Brian keeps his crypto in baseball NFTs.
no, I actually don't own it. Don't own any. I did.
You did buy one, didn't you? You bought one pack, didn't you?
No, so I was going to like the first day they came out, and then they sold out right away. And then I was like,
trolling your crypto friends is one of my favorite pastimes.
Yes, I know.
I always used to check on your crypto friends.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so that was a pretty big thing that the All In guys got into this week. They also talked about
that's the All In podcast, by the way.
Podcast, yeah. So one of the things they talked about too is how the guys were advising their children and how to deal with some of this AI stuff. So I think the question was my kid was, the guy popped up with a question. My kid's a freshman in college. How should I? Live there at their live session. How should I position this stuff with my child, and what kind of jobs are going to be available, and what kind of fields, and what do you guys think? And they all kind of went through it, and
it's not conclusive, right?
Really had a great answer. I mean, one of the guys said, "Well, really focus on math because math is still the absolute or something."
Right, math and biology.
Yeah,
right.
Math and biology are the absolutes, and then the other guys went into, people, social skills,
entrepreneurial,
leadership,
Calacanis.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Which is,
So let me clean this up. So so at their podcast, they were doing a live reporting or whatever, and the studio audience, they opened up for questioning. One of the audience members asked, "My kid's coming up to college age. What advice should I give my kid to focus on his education for the future of AI?" And that was what was posed. And as you said, they were kind of non-conclusive, right?
Yeah, they really were, and they kind of poo-pooed the idea of like the service industry jobs, and you hear people say, "Well, AI is not going to replace plumbers. It's not going to replace electricians and all that kind of stuff," and they kind of dismissed that a little bit, which I was a little disappointed in because I think that's pretty much true. I mean, for the most part, maybe the bigger projects, infrastructure, if you're fixing I-95 in Philadelphia or something, there may be robotics that will be able to do those jobs. But as far as this is a country with a lot of really old, bad infrastructure and water systems and electricity systems and all that kind of stuff. And robotics might be able to do those jobs. You're not going to spend $500,000 on a robot plumber or something that's going to do that. Like it just doesn't make sense. So those jobs are still going to be really important because there's a lot of stuff in this country that needs to be fixed.
I was thinking about that today. In fact, long before you and I hit the record button this morning, and I spent way too much time thinking about these robo taxis and those stations that the cars will, after X amount of time, or there'll probably be some sort of satisfaction. You ever see those bathroom buttons that's like, is this bathroom clean, happy, sad, neutral phase?
Yeah.
It'd be something like that. So when you get out of a car, you're like, wasn't that great when I got in, and then the car will dispatch itself to the service center, right? And then it's like, will there be humans with vacuum in their hands, or will there be robots? And then I'm thinking like, I don't vacuum my car as much as I probably should, but and last time you vacuumed your car, like you know, the wheel well hump and like the transmission, you know, just humps and stuff that like
Yeah.
you kind of have to like
A lot of humping
negotiate.
in the stuff.
There's a lot of hump, right? And you have to like, there's that like dexterous kind of activity where you're like, you know, maybe grab it too, maybe the vacuum thing is too broad, and you think to yourself, well, I want to get there, so let me like switch the head on this, and you know what I mean? Like, well, it's almost like a craft. It's almost like it's something that it seems right now very difficult to imagine a robot having that cognition, right?
Mhm.
Where you're manipulating something so I don't know, human-esque, you know?
Yeah, it falls under the category of just because you can doesn't mean you should. You could create a robot who's got the sensors, he tells you if it's cleans or not, tells you if it missed the spot and do all that kind of stuff. But if you've got an excess of labor who's been displaced from a number of jobs, you know, are you really going to replace those jobs? I mean, you're going to have cars that are, you're not going to have you're not going to have as many makes and models on the road as
Right.
now probably. So you're going to,
Although I was blown away a couple of years ago when some pundit was saying like, listen, you could have a McDonald's car, you get a free Big Mac if you just take their car. You know what I mean?
We were talking about that on the show. You're going to have like an NBC sponsored car. Like if you're taking yourself to Hartford or something, you can take this car and, you know, it's going to be the peaceful one, or you're going to take a one that plays Good Morning America.
Or like a car
It's
with just
cheaper.
with a exercise bike in it.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
You know?
Sure. Why not? And you'll still have group transportation, right? You'll still have, you know, lower cost options that are less private, but even still, as far as sedans, I mean, how many different makes and models of sedans are on the road?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and when you watch all the future movies, all the cars look the same, right?
Just about, yeah.
And everybody dresses the same too.
Right.
But
So yeah,
yes.
what would your advice be for Luke? Have you thought about that?
I have. It's a little bit too early, but I would say
Well, look. Let me ask you this: do you think Luke will ever get his driver's license? Luke is
no. I've said no. No, we've
Brian's
talked about
son.
that
How old
in
is
the
he now?
house. He's
5?
5. Yeah. I don't think he will.
You don't think so?
No.
10 years. So it's in 11 years he'll be 16, which is classic driving age.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you.
I don't think he will.
I think I have a 10-year-old, and I think she probably will. I have a 6-year-old. No, how old is Melon? 6 or 7. It's gonna be close, I think, for those guys.
Yeah. I mean, again, you get into the, you know, it's a form of identification, or maybe there'll be like a,
Well, I mean,
you know, he's
you get a DMV.
yeah,
issued
driver ID card. I
yeah.
know, but if you know, 10 years from now, there's still going to be cars. He may not need it, might have it just to, you know.
So you don't think he will, though? I didn't know if you were full on this side of that coin or not. It may be a hobbyist thing,
Right.
You
Yeah,
get-
maybe
you
that's
do it
what it is
just
too.
to
You know, it might be one of those things that's like, you know, when I learned to drive, I learned to drive on a stick. You know, maybe that's probably not the greatest analogy, but it's like, you know, that's going away, you know, but you might as well learn on it in case,
right.
you know, you're somewhere and somebody has a heart attack and the only car around is a stick. You know, they used to give that example, whatever. Like, it's not that much harder anyway. So you might just tell them, you need to drive a car.
Yeah.
There's cars around. You don't 100% need one, but
Right.
you should know how to do it because,
Right.
you know, it's a good skill set to have and whatever.
It's interesting. So what about education? Where are you nudging him? My wife's been nudging our oldest daughter to she thinks she's going to be a cardiologist. She's 10 years
Mhm.
old. Like, it's been programmed into her by my wife, and I
Yeah.
think she's committed to it. So are you programming Luke for any predisposition?
No, not yet. I think, you know, I think if he can learn to build stuff and do stuff with his hands, I think that's probably, you know, good enough for now. I think if he can communicate effectively, I think if he, you know, can do those things. I mean, if he can, you know, at this stage, it's about, can he, you know, kind of play by himself? Can he do something on his own without some sort of structure, right? That's what the old timers always say. We used to ride our bike to the basketball court, and organize a game. Now everything's too organized. So if kids can kind of play by themselves, be a leader, and organize things and keep themselves busy, that's a leadership quality that will translate into being able to start your own business and do that type of stuff. So we're 54 minutes. But then the other question is, will there be employees? Will you work? You know, we've already kind of shifted away from working 40 years for one company at 40 hours a week, you know, a telephone company or whatever. Will everybody just be independent contractors and do different jobs from different places, and work from home is obviously transitioned, and so maybe people will everybody will be their own business, and kind of pick up jobs like as they need things done, because that might be in the best interest of companies to have just a stable of people available. There's no need to pay somebody 40 hours next week if you only need them for 27 hours, and vice versa. So being able to be a self-starter, being able to kind of cobble together an income or piece different jobs together and spread your week out instead of being 9 to 5, 5 days a week. It's a few hours on a Sunday afternoon, a few hours on a Saturday morning. So those type of skills, I think, if that's my long-winded answer to your question, is just kind of being a self-starter and being able to communicate.
Yeah. So for me, I just try to it's like death, trying to worry about like if you're going to pick the right vocation is kind of futile. It's not I don't think it's a good way to live,
because you're going to change 3 or 4 times even in this environment. So
yeah, the only thing I hope to see my kids do is just feel useful, and exercise their creativity in whatever aspect that may be, whether it's engineering or my kids, the girls are very into arts, the arts and the performing arts, the dance. Neither of them seem to be actors or actresses, but they love dancing and gymnastics and arts and crafts and things.
Yeah.
I try to, the older one's taking to, fiscal responsibility, and she can save, and she's spending now on her own with Apple Pay and stuff. The little one seems to think that just money grows on trees, and she doesn't. She's not understanding that money is a limited resource. But I just we literally do math questions during dinner. We do spelling, so we're just exercising we focus on intellectual exercises. And then other than that, I just try to be like, just feel useful, not lazy. You just can't be lazy.
Yeah,
whatever that is. If you want to be if you want to be houses, you want to be whatever it is, just you gotta not be lazy. So that's where I'm focusing, because it's with the AI stuff, things can change so fast and adopt so fast. So I think it's almost futile to try to say, like, should we go into medicine? Should we go into law? Should we go into the trades, plumbing, electrical? Should we, it's like, who knows?
Right.
Who really knows? I'm a technologist, and my industry is, of course, I've already had to pivot my entire company 2-3 times already.
Yeah.
So that's all I've got.
Yeah, they likely will too. All right, so we made it through our first kind of in-person show.
Yeah, we plowed through it.
Tech was fine. We'll see what the finished product looks like.
Yeah, we always have a good time. Hopefully the audio works. You're using your mic. You're sitting across the table from me, and I'm using my mic, and hopefully we get a good product out of this. But I always enjoy you, my friend.
Yes, always good.
Nathan, thank you for joining us. And let's take us out. I'm Eric Bjorndorf, CEO of Evernet Consulting. We're a national IT. And as of Q2, we're a marketing agency as well. And we just launched a new line of business, so we can do your website and all things digital marketing. You can find me at evernetco.com. Schedule a discovery call. I'll give you an hour of my time, gratis. And you can follow us on any social network at evernetco.
And my company is Northshire Consulting. We are a Connecticut-based investment advisory firm working with individuals and families on all their investment planning stuff. And our show is called Finance and Technology Insights, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.